Welcome, everybody. Great to see you. Welcome back for episode 3. Hi, Pat. Hi, Pat. Pat's in New York City, I think. So nice to see you. So we're just
good to see you too.
Thank you. God, it's been a long time. Pat used to be a client of mine years ago. So nice to see you. You look fantastic. So welcome, everybody. I'm just gonna hang for a minute until people continue to join us. And if I start sweating, please pardon me, because my air conditioning, the central air broke down today. So that was fun. And 80-degree weather. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I'm so excited for tonight, for episode 3. And I just want to encourage all of you to receive the transmission tonight. We have 3 amazing panelists here tonight, and truly, truly gifted friends of mine, have been on all the panels if you've missed them, but especially tonight, such an important topic in post-COVID times. I want you to receive the hearts and transmission and the message and the lessons of this hour, and really take this seriously. Grab your pens and your notes with your aha moments and think about, what is this new vision of yourself that you're creating right at this moment? So tonight, let us know. Put into the chat if you don't mind. Let us know where you're chatting in from. Coming in from. We would love to see what parts of the country, what parts of the world that you're joining us from. We've had an overwhelming response with well over almost 200 participants registering for this across all 4 panels. So what that tells me is this is so needed, right? Especially during post-COVID times. And so tonight, what we're going to talk about is emotional resilience and building a toolbox of emotional resilience, how we can contain our disappointments and loss in life. What are the most important steps to regain our ground and footing and feel a sense of balance again? And most importantly, how can we trust again? Trust each other and trust the world that contains us in a world of disappointments on a daily basis. So I just welcome you all for taking the step to joining us and instead of watching bad TV, joining us tonight for this important medicine. It's so important. So I want to say to you that, I've read all your surveys, and in general, the common themes that have come out of these surveys is, there's an overwhelming resonating feeling that exists among us: physical, mental, and emotional dysregulation. People are feeling disempowered, extreme worry and fear and anxiety and hypervigilance. When we are in a fear state, when we're in a scarcity state, we react, we become hypervigilant and overcompensate. And so there are tools to actually counterbalance that. And our bodies and our system is designed to go back to homeostasis, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional dysregulation. And as a health coach over the last 12 years or so, I've been on a mission to champion for clients to advocate for their health, turn around and lose up to 100 pounds of body fat. But more importantly, besides the health turnaround, I've been able to help clients master their mindset around uncertainty. And this is the biggest trouble spot for everybody in terms of really moving life forward in a more resilient way. And so in this experience, in this extenuating period of the stress and anxiety of what's happening in the world around us, I want you to think about the incredible tools that you would be gaining tonight. And here's the deal. 80 to 90% of the world around us have been living with dysregulation way before COVID. Okay, more than 65%, 70% of the population has been living with preconditions of disease, whether it was known or diagnosed or not. This has been existing way beyond COVID. So are you ready right now to become the next 10%, the 10% who's going to navigate uncertainty with ease and fearlessness? So this is really an invitation, you guys, a new chapter and a journey to get back to your best vision of yourself. And what Unbreakable means is resilience. It's about adaptability and about clarity, about what deeply motivates us and drives you, what's most important to you. And no matter where you are in the journey today, becoming unbreakable is the everlasting rewards. It's the everlasting rewards to get back to your best self every single day, getting back and bending like the tree instead of being broken, bending your limbs. And when we come together as a community, it's kind of like branches, right? When you have a branch and when you bundle those branches and when those branches bend, they don't break because the community stays together and we're stronger together. So during these challenging times, receive the support and guidance because it is there, it exists for you, just for you to take that step and say yes to yourself. So I want you to take a minute, and those of you who are joining in, just chat into the box, into the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from. And I want this to be interactive, and we're going to have a chance to, before I introduce the panelists, I want you to put into the chat box, what is your number one priority to become unbreakable? Is it mindset? Is it habits? Is it nutrition? Is it your health turnaround? Is it relationships? Is it stress and anxiety? Every single one of you who've joined us tonight, put in to the chat box one priority that you want to become more unbreakable, that you can become more bendable in, okay? So I'm gonna begin with, while you're chatting that into the chat box, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Awesome. Gosh, I love this. Idaho, Wisconsin, Brookfield, Connecticut. I love it. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And from Jersey, awesome. And so tonight we have an incredible group of panelists. And let me just see, because I'm navigating everybody here while I'm doing this, but I'm going to introduce the panelists right now. And first, sorry, got a little loud on that music. Okay, I want to introduce Junie Moon Schreiber. She is the midlife love coach. She is the author of the Loving the Whole Package, Shed the Shame and Live Out Loud. Junie Moon is a women's empowerment leader, love coach, certified shadow work coach, and has supported thousands of women over the past 30 years to claim what is their birthright, the freedom to be and love themselves without apology. Love that. And using her heart-centered dating strategies coupled with powerful mindset tools, Junie helps women in midlife magnetize their ideal partner and experience next level love. Along the way, women embrace this precious stage in midlife with confidence, playfulness, and ease. And don't we all need that, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the next, and welcome, Junie. So thank you for joining us. And Junie is a
So
super,
good to be here.
and you guys are going to love her. And then next up, Jennifer Cormier is the podcast host of Walk Through Grief with Grace. She's a grief guide, a somatic healer, and ceremonial artist. Yes. And if Junie, if I miss anybody coming in, if you could just allow them in, that would be fantastic. Thank you for your help with that.
I am on it.
Yep.
Sure.
So Reverend Jen Cormier is a grief guide, a ceremonial artist who brings 20 years of experience in the healing arts to clients who are moving through life transitions and grief. Jen is the creator and host of the Walk Through Grief with Grace podcast and the Transform Your Grief Immersion, a holistic group program that addresses cognitive, physical, emotional, spiritual, creative, and communal layers of each person so they can not only heal from their loss, but step into living and loving more fully than ever. And you can find her healing meditations and love stories in the Walk Through Grief with Grace podcast. And a little bit about Jen. Jen and I connected about both our father's deaths and journeys with cancer. So we are kindred spirits because our stories were very similar in terms of how we got into coaching and how we took grief and loss and turned it into a service. So Dr. Robert Kandarjian. So welcome, Jen. Thank you, beautiful Jen. And Jen is she's based out of San Diego, but she's here on the East Coast visiting her family. So I'm so glad she's on the same time zone now. And then last but certainly not least, Dr. Robert Kandarjian. He's the author of Sacred Intentions and the book called The Masculine Heart. He's a healing touch practitioner and a chiropractor, and he's been practicing mind-body integrative therapy since 1983, embracing a holistic and spiritual approach to wellness. And he combines his clinical and intuitive skills to aid patients and groups to go inward. And his motto is happiness is making good decisions, so trust your voice. So welcome, panelists. I'm so incredibly grateful.
Thank you.
This is a truly powerhouse panel. So as we start the Q&A, if you have questions, please chat it in. And as questions come up, we will pick up those questions during the Q&A with the audience, okay? Jen and Junie and Robert, we know that, grief and loss affects us so many different ways. And we've experienced grief and loss in multiple levels throughout the last 3 years. And it's affected our relationships, our careers, our place of living. It's really turned our worlds upside down. So everybody's experiencing loss into some level. So the question number one is, please tell us, panelists, Jen, Junie, and Robert, take a couple minutes and answer concisely and briefly if you can. We want to hear from you. In your opinion, how does grief from loss show up in people's lives, especially now during post-COVID times? How, in your experiences, in your practice, how does grief from loss show up? What does it look like? Who wants to take that? Junie, you want to take that?
Sure. I think it shows up differently with everybody. I mean, it's a journey. It's a personal journey. I think sometimes it can show up as exhaustion, heaviness. So our bodies might exhibit some kind of energetic or a lack thereof experience. It could feel like a shutdown emotionally, because at the end of the day, loss is a beautiful, beautiful feeling if we run with it, if we move with it. And yet when it's so huge, and it's been so huge, it can really be debilitating and shut us down and have us want to isolate. So from emotionally shutting down to physically shutting down to just not feeling able to just shoot up to the light. We're just in it. It's heavy. It holds us back in different ways. So I'll just start there.
Yeah. And just a brief mention, if you can, just about relationships. Can you, since you're the love coach, can you talk about relationships and how it shows up in relationships? I know that's a big topic.
Yeah, it is. And that is my specialty, helping people that are single as well as people in relationships have extraordinary love and connection. And loss, it's an interesting thing because loss actually is very connecting. It connects us together because we're having an experience together. Specifically, though, to your question, how does it affect relationships? So with the single women that I'm working with, again, it's that fear that is showing up more than anything of how do I move on? I feel different now. I'm afraid to open up because I've just experienced something that's painful and I'm still potentially in that pain. So if somebody's still in that pain, again, there's that shutdown, there's that heart that we might want to be protective of. And so if somebody's like, I want to meet somebody, suddenly it's like the rain on the parade, and it's a little bit more challenging to open. There's more of a, I think I'll just watch Netflix and check out. And obviously we're going to talk about tools on how to be with grief, but that's what I'm seeing is women are struggling with opening and rising up because grief is having them slow down, go within, and shut down.
I love that. Thank you, Junie. Thank you so much for that. Jen or Robert, do you want to take that question? How is grief showing up for people?
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I think that there's a natural, I love how you express that, Junie, that it's hard to open up and rise up. There's a natural, in my experience and the folks that I work with, there's a natural sort of heaviness that happens in the grief process that can manifest as depression. Right. I'm seeing a lot of anxiety. So many people are reporting to me they're feeling anxious. So I think, like you said, it can manifest in all different kinds of ways, and everybody is different. But I'm seeing a lot of anxiety out there, and a lot of depression. Just to answer that question really briefly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, very briefly, like the first thing that happens with grief is that we are forced to go inward. And that can be both positive or negative. And as Jen said, sometimes that inward journey can go into isolation and sadness, fear. And grief is for me, like when I work with grief is one of those experiences that has a lot of emotions. It's not just sorrow or sadness. Grief contains anger, sometimes rage. It contains certainly sadness and sorrow, but also a lot of fear. And so grief forces us to go inward and also can help us shift our priorities. Like we tend to look at our priorities and go, oh, what do I need to change? I mean, we can talk about grief for hours, but just like for me, like what I look for with patients who are going through grief is like, I try to pay attention to how are their priorities changing when they are in grief, and what emotion are they stuck in that they need to break from.
That's a really good point. I know, when I was grieving or anticipating grief of my dad's death, and Jen and I have talked about this in her podcast interviews and other conversations. When we are anticipating something very permanent or very irreversible, we tend to go into self-protection mode, right? And that's part of the inward piece, right? And that shows up in my experience like hypervigilance. We start overcompensating to a 10th degree, 100th degree of wanting to double check, triple check and everything, or like it's nervous anxiety. And I love the fact that you said resolving, living with that feeling, getting stuck with that feeling is a sense of hypervigilance. So so we'll talk in a minute about how we move through that stuckness of that feeling. But any questions from the audience regarding that question or anything like that? You could just chat that in. So next up, what is the most important thing for people to do to move forward after loss of a beloved, loss of a relationship, loss of connection through isolation during these times, loss of job opportunities, a loss of sense of self? What are the most, I mean, this is really a big, broad question, but like, how can we actually, move forward? What are the initial steps that are important? So I'm going to start back with Junie or Jen. Jen, do you want to take that actually, Jen? And then we'll move to Junie.
Sure. I think a couple of things come right to mind with that, and how you phrase the question, how do you move forward? One of the things that has been essential in my grief journey, and that I help folks with, is to remember that we are an embodied being. So to actually move our physical, take care of our physical self and move our physical self, because our emotions, your experience, Tina, of sort of that hypervigilance or that freezing, we need to move the energy, the emotions through our body and out of our body. And that might look like getting massage. That might look like going for a walk on the beach or in the woods. And, I love what you said, Robert, about, grief is an inward journey, and we do need to do some inward work, but we can have some discernment on what is unhealthy isolation and what is, I'm doing some questioning about my priorities, and I'm taking some time by myself in nature, right? So I think for me, what I've noticed is, if it's outside, it's usually healthy. If you're connecting in the woods, if you're connecting by a lake or by a river, or by a stream, by yourself, that, and I've never expressed it quite in that way, but I'm just making that revelation in this moment. And if it's pushing people away and not connecting to other humans who are your support network, that's not healthy. So I think the first thing is to actually be in our body, move emotions through our body. And the second would be to accept and receive that support of community. If that looks like your therapist, your family member, your friend, a community that you're a part of, and really allowing yourself to be held by others is a really important step.
Awesome. Love that. Yeah. Go ahead, Robert.
I would add that that's really great. Nature, moving the body. And I would add, from experience with patients, I find that patients, I would just add two more things to that. I found that patients who have a spiritual anchor do better with moving forward from grief. And also patients who have a purpose, they have something to wake up for, will usually do better. Yeah. And very briefly, those two things feel important as well. Yes, thank you.
I love that. Yes. Junie?
So much here. And as Robert said, this is such a huge topic. One of the words that really popped out for me was allowing, because in our culture, grief is not talked about. It's very rarely accepted. Like, I have a friend, whenever I go into tears, she's like, don't cry. She tries to stop me from crying. And people are uncomfortable a lot of times with grief. And I think that one of the first steps is to allow yourself to feel it, to heal it. We've heard that before. If you want to heal it, you got to feel it. And to take the shame off of the process of the journey, whether it's an internal journey, like Robert was talking about, connecting to spirit and being in stillness, or being out in the world, whatever it means to you in reference to connection, because grief is about an experience of loss. And if there's a loss, we need to get reconnected in some way. Right. So to allow ourselves to go, okay, ouch, and feel the ouch and allow ourselves to move through it. Let the water take us and let us flow. Because it's when we stop that water flow, that's when we're getting the anxiety. That's when we're getting the fear. That's when we're having the anger. And all of those are valid too. Those are clues as something is up. And so what I would say to this is lean in to the experience, lean in to the feelings, and not to isolate. Find the people or the support network or the trees to hug or spirit to connect to be able to connect to that piece that's feeling disconnected.
I know one of
there's-
the things that I learned in hospice care was you actually heal your grief, your grieving and your mourning through talking about it, just verbalizing it. And a lot of times, like the panelists were discussing, going inward doesn't really give us the permission to talk about it and verbalize it. But what I'm hearing from the panelists is first going inward, listening. How am I grieving loss? It may not just be about death. It may be grieving our situations. It may be grieving the world, our condition. It may be just this overwhelming, oppressive feeling that might be happening that we don't have control over. And that's I just wanted to add to that. So Robert, you had something, did you want to add to that?
Junie, when you were talking about loss, I remember Jean Sonoda. She's a wonderful psychiatrist. She wrote God is in every woman, God in every man. Anyway, she talks a lot about grief, and she said, like, in one sentence, she says, life is about love and loss. And I agree with that. And I think we need to have some classes or some kind of, I don't know, workshops for little kids. When I say kids, I mean 7 and older, to teach them that loss is part of life. And they're going to lose their grandparents one day. They may lose their friend who may move to Florida, or they may lose their favorite pet or favorite toy. And that, like, we don't really touch on the subject of loss. And so I think it's really good to introduce them to that, to the experience that the earthly experience contains loss. And when we do experience loss, there are ways we can maneuver through it and manage it.
Mm-hmm. So how can we look at that? How can we look at loss differently then? I know for me, like I even had loss of friendship disconnections. Like COVID has challenged all of us in terms of our value system. And with all the stuff going on in the world, it's separated us like so many ways, mentally, emotionally, physically. But like, how can we look at loss differently? I love the fact that you said that it's a part of life, but maybe is there another way to look at loss? Go ahead, Junie.
Last night, just last night, I was cooking dinner and something happened with my mom, and it was no big deal. And we are like best friends, and she's getting older, obviously, and she's got cancer, and she's doing well. And I'm being confronted right now more than ever that she's not going to be here forever. And I found myself sobbing. I allowed myself because it felt good to like move the energy. And what I connected to was the loss is about the deep gratitude of what I have. I am so grateful, beyond grateful, to the connection and the love and the beauty and what my mother has given me. And to me, it's like the loss and gratitude. The bigger the loss, the more you're losing, the bigger the loss, in my opinion. And I just tapped into the gratitude of, wow, I'm feeling all this because I've been so blessed. So it's kind of another reframe to add to, it's not just I'm losing, but look what I've been blessed with.
Right. I love that, Junie. That's an amazing way of looking at loss, looking at disconnect, even relationship disconnect. One of the things that just kind of hearkening on what Robert said also was loss is a part of life. But what if we looked at loss as a passage of time? What if we looked at loss as a portal to something else? That's another possibility.
Yeah, an opportunity, a shift, part of our humanity. And again, we have not been given the tools or the permission to even talk about this, to be able to feel this.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is a portal. It's an opportunity.
Right.
Right.
Jen, go ahead, Robert.
Yes.
Mhm.
No, please let Jen take.
Yeah, I think that so much of the grief work that I do is about sort of that eagle vision, being able to see from a different perspective, right? We think that it's monotone, that the story is black and white, it's death and it's birth and it's, weddings are good and happy and death is bad and sad, somehow. But really, it is a full color spectrum at each moment of transition, really. Because of what you're sharing about, yeah, there's gratitude with each loss, right? And there's love that comes in. So I think being able to have a different perspective, it really opens the door to see major loss or any kind of loss as an opportunity, right? An opportunity to be grateful, an opportunity to see the love that was there, an opportunity to reevaluate, what's important to me.
Right.
So when we can do that, we can go, oh, there's the gift in this pain too. Like this is painful and there might be sadness and anger, but there's also a gift in there. There's also love. There's also gratitude. There might also be pleasure in there, right? So to really see it as the full spectrum opportunity.
I love that. So I have a follow-up question with that. How can we see pleasure in loss? And this is not just about death loss. It's divorce. It's about, friendship loss, changes in relationships, changes in our normalcy. So how can we find pleasure in loss? Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, I would.
Jen, that was for you, babe.
That was for me. Okay, that was all for me. So I'll just share this really short story about. I didn't know how to grieve when my dad died. I had no idea. I had never experienced loss. And two of my mentors said, take a whole year and grief be your teacher. Walk with grief through every season, every cycle, every holiday, and let it teach you. And I just started with that. And that felt like a different perspective than, okay, I got to get through this memorial and over this grief so I can live again, right? It's a different, like, oh, I can relax. I can give this time and space. And one of the things, because I'm a dancer, I'm a mover, I started a practice, just like a yoga practice, where I set a timer for 15 minutes and I started moving every day. And it might just be lying on the floor for the whole time, wailing and sobbing. And other days it would be shaking and groaning or whatever. It looked different every day. But I remember this day where I had my timer on. I started putting on music, some of my dad's favorite music, and I started dancing again. Mm-hmm. And I remember like dancing and moving and breathing and I caught myself with my arms flung open and I felt so good. And there was pleasure. Like I was feeling joy, like pleasure in my body. And I felt guilty. I was like, oh no, this is my grieving. I'm grieving my dad. This is probably not right. And I've had many people tell me this in different institutionalized, we come from the Catholic Church background or some particular background where you're supposed to be in mourning and feeling icky for a long time. There was that moment of guilt, like I shouldn't feel pleasure. And then I was like, well, I guess this is what the grief is teaching me. And I kept going and I just felt pleasure. And I realized you can laugh while you're grieving. You can feel pleasure while you're grieving. Like all of that is part of the weaving.
I love that.
That's
That is perfect, Jen. And that is,
Yeah,
again, not just a familiar or a spousal death. It's like death, when we lose, have life transitions in terms of divorce, separation, in terms of family changes, in terms of health changes, like dramatic health changes, it feels like death. And so I love the fact that Jen is a somatic healer. And what that means is, basically embodying, embodying grief, but, our bodies hold grief, just like we hold our health. Our minds are a powerful thing. And when we actually are in a grieving mode and light clouds are gray around us, it actually affects our physiology. So I love the fact that you use that modality of dance and movement for healing. And so that might be something that people can try. Robert, did you want to follow up with that?
yeah, well, right. To move from grief to pleasure, right? Let's stay with pleasure. To move from grief to pleasure, there's a bridge there. And that bridge is letting ourselves feel the emotional waves of the grief, whatever they may be, right? And also to recognize that feeling those waves doesn't necessarily mean we are going to experience the bottomless pit. It's not. There is a bottom. I mean, yes, there are some people who don't, who can't recover from grief, yes, but most people do recover. It is not a bottomless pit. And once we allow the waves of and the emotions of that grief to surface and release, then we eventually move to pleasure automatically. It's just a matter of time.
I love that. Yeah. And Jen said to move from grief to pleasure, there's a bridge there. Yes. I love that bridge. How can we bridge more connection?
Well, the bridge is a little difficult, because we're not in a culture that allows grief to be fully expressed. I grew up in Middle East, and whenever there was a funeral, certainly the women, as well as the men, but more the women, they were allowed to grieve very loudly. They were allowed to wail, and the men would stand around them and kind of support the women, and they would cry, of course. But so the culture itself allowed that type of expression and release. But in Western cultures where we are more in our left brains and intellectual, we don't really allow ourselves to go through the waves. And we need to learn that. That's why I think it's important to talk about loss with children, not too, children above the age of 7 or 8, like kind of introduce them to what is loss, what is the experience of it, and the realities of it.
Definitely an underserved area. So
Yeah.
I love this. I love the physical releasing, finding pleasure in your physical self, moving energy through physical, going out into nature, connecting, verbalizing it. Like in times of loss, in times of post-COVID times, in times of grieving, separation, and isolation, we've really lost trust for one another and trust of ourselves, maybe. So I wanted to just follow up with this last question with the panelists. And if you could, if the audience has questions, please chat it in, because we're going to respond to it as we go. How does trust, how can we trust ourselves again after relationship transitions, death transitions? How can we feel confidence again? How can we feel like we can trust ourselves to be emotionally resilient, to when we're so inward, when we're so concave? How can we trust ourselves again? Junie, you want to take that?
Sure, I love this topic.
I know.
So when I think, again, energetically, when I think of trust, it's a relaxed state and an open, like I can allow something in. And so if there's a lack of trust, there's again, there's the shutdown, there's the close. And so, you were talking about hypervigilance before.
Mm.
And so in the work that I do, we talk about different parts, and there's this part inside of us, we call it the risk manager. And this part was birthed at probably your first breath, if not before. And it is watching out to make sure you don't get hurt. And what's it going to do to keep you from getting hurt? It's going to shut you down. It's going to have you think all these things are going to happen. And so to be able to trust again, we need to update the software. We need to learn that and shift our awareness of what is happening. And sometimes we can't do this by ourselves. That's why we need each other. That's why we need these mirrors. And so trust comes from inside. It's not going to come from outside. And when we can get this part to see that it's overreacting, that what's happened is not necessarily going to happen again, and that you're in a different place and you have a support and things have shifted, that part can then say, oh, wait a second, the strategy I used when you were a kid, or the strategy I used when you were in that last relationship to close you off, you're in a different place. And that will allow you to open more, because you can relax and trust that you have your own back, that you have your own heart. So to have more trust, you need to update the risk manager to let it see that things are shifting for you, and there's a high price you're paying, like anxiety, depression, illness, by not shifting these behaviors.
Any questions from the audience? Do we want to follow that up? Jen, you want to follow that up, and then Robert?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful what you said, Junie. And it's so funny. My dad was a risk management that was a specialist.
Wow.
So my mom was a rape crisis counselor, and my dad was a risk control specialist. So I grew up with fear.
Right.
So yeah, updating that software. And how do we need to be able to do that with gentleness, because we can't do it with force. So I think the number one thing to develop that trust, that inner trust, is having an attitude of welcoming, an attitude of gentleness, and then really small baby steps, like the least common denominator of, promising yourself the smallest things. Like, I'm promising myself, that I'm going to get outside once a day for at least 3 minutes, right? I'm promising myself that I'm going to set a timer and breathe for 3 minutes every day, or, something like that. And as you take action of like really nurturing self-action, I feel like that is something that really builds that self-trust. Like, I can count on me. I might not be able to count on the world, but I can count on me, and making it really easy and really gentle.
Love that. Yeah. And just to add to that, Jen, yeah, that's the same thing with how we care for ourselves, our physical bodies, in our nutrition, in our movement. How can we care for our bodies, just even in terms of the food that we put into our mouths, and being mindful about how this food or nutrition actually, creates cellular repair at a cellular level. Which affects our physiology, not only our physiology, but our emotional well-being as well. And so that self-care and making promises, those baby steps of promises to ourselves, is huge. Those are real actionable things that you do have control over. And when we're at a loss or a transition or a change, a drastic change where we are having difficulty coping, we have to decide for ourselves and choose for ourselves, what do we have control over? What is that one baby small step? I love that, Jen. Thank you so much. Robert, anything else with that?
Yeah, they're just, very briefly, like the state of distrust, right? Whether we don't trust ourselves or don't trust others, is a state of chronic mental activity. There is no stillness.
Mm-hmm.
And to move to a place of trust, we have to first, I believe, like really make the effort to move to a place of stillness, And in that stillness, we're going to find our inner voice. And our inner voice will tell us who can be trusted, who cannot be trusted. So it's really, it's an emotional, but it's also really a spiritual path to move to this place of trust. I say spiritual because, you know, in that stillness, we're going to find the higher self within us, you know. And also, I did want to say something earlier, which I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's not. No, you know, we were talking about loss, and I did want to comment about something from my experience personally, as well as taking people through grief, is that if we didn't have the experience of loss on this planet, we wouldn't have the experience of the need to connect to a higher power, the need to get closer to God, you know? So loss actually pushes us towards that path. Not all of us, but it's certainly an impetus, you know? Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you're really focusing on this whole spirituality piece of it. And some people who are agnostic or atheist or never had experiences growing up with spirituality, or don't even have, you know, have difficulty having a spiritual practice. You know, they may be hard science and they don't believe in the unseen. And we know that healing from a holistic perspective has so much to do with our energy. Our mind is a powerful tool to actually navigate and actually enable our bodies to go back to balance, enable our lives to go back to balance, enable us to take control over the things that we do have control over. The spirituality piece is amazing. What is one thing, Robert, just to follow up on that question, what is one thing, how can people who don't have a spiritual practice begin a spiritual practice?
They find a thing that brings them close to their heart, to their core. I mean, that could be nature, that could be their grandchild, that could be their, you know, a town they grew up in, or a person that they love. So it's really about anything that opens the heart will bring them back to spirituality, you know. I mean, at the start, yeah, I mean, ultimately from a higher spiritual dimension, it's the state of prayer and meditation and contemplation and silence, you know, all that, certainly. But a good starting point is, like, you know, Jen said, you know, nature, moving the body, because that all brings us back inside and brings us back into that state of stillness. That's a start.
Yes. And God
and
is
also, you know, talking about food,
yeah.
because I know you're very, you know, you do a lot of coaching on food, and like, you know what, sometimes cooking, you know, cooking healthy foods like that whole meditative state of cooking and eating quietly, like can do that as well.
Yeah, I offered a course way back when called Eating as a Meditation, and we
I like that.
rushed through
good.
life. And one of the biggest, hardest challenges for people who are trying to lose more than 20 pounds of body fat is they are multitasking, and they have difficulty slowing down their breath and eating. And so it really is a major sabotage. But I always say, practice just getting into spiritual practice through eating as a meditation. That means being really choiceful, chewing your food. Literally every bite for bite, look at it as nourishment inside your soul. And so there's this training that I do offer periodically called Eating as a Meditation. And so I'm glad you brought that up. Are there spirituality is slowing down? There was a question from Diane about the balance of self-care versus doing and managing. Anybody want to take that? Just have one more minute.
I mean, doing and managing what? I'm sorry.
The balance of self-care versus doing and managing things, the risk manager, like when we get into scarcity mode, when we get into fear mode, we start doing, people start doing, like you have to figure it out. You have to fix the problem. You got to make it better, right? And our automatic response is to be reactive, right? So when we're reactive, we forget that self-care is actually a very intentional process, right? So when we're actually moving our body, when we're making those baby promises to ourselves to go out in nature and connect, or to connect with someone you love over the phone, or that is very intentional. So I hope that answers your question, Dan. The balance, to think about it that way, is instead of doing, fixing, managing, how about looking at it as, I'm going to be really intentional. And sometimes it requires time in your calendar for self-care, literally blocking off time. You know, I have my clients block off colored time blocks in their calendar. I'm like, they're so overscheduled. I'm like, all right, so how can you stack it with something you're already doing, like brushing your teeth in the morning? What kind of positive affirmations can I make? Am I really loving myself when I'm brushing my teeth, and every little corner between my teeth, you know, every little bite of nourishment that I'm making? So hopefully that answers the question of the balance between self-care and doing managing.
Can I add something? And also the opposite of reactive is pause, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can, to balance this between self-care and doing, you know, just pause.
Yeah.
Pause.
Right. So that if there's no further questions, I'm just gonna start winding this episode down. Intentional. Okay, yeah, sure, no problem, Diane. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. So I want to invite you guys back for episode 4. This has been tremendous. This is just really riding the surface. We're really just kind of like, you know, getting a sampling and inspiration and opening up possibilities beyond just that stuckness of grieving transitions right now. And as a world, we're going through a transition right now. And this transition requires very intentional care. And so we may not have all the answers right here, right now, but I wanted to invite you. Come back next week on episode 4. And I wanted to also invite you to a way to actually put some of these ideas into practice and deeper immersion. And for those people who didn't join us on episode 1 and 2, there's still an opportunity. But basically, I wanted to invite you to start your Unbreakable journey for free. And I thought about this and I said, what would be a really good opportunity to put some of these ideas into practice, because we can't really get into practice if it's something that is not normal to us. We actually have to be super intentional about it. So I wanted to invite you to a training. And my Vitality Vault is really an opportunity to start your Unbreakable journey and practice and get into 3 training dates as a group coaching program. I'm offering this for free for everybody who's registered. You know, it's an opportunity to really get into, you know, content like, you know, recreating your personal health story, eating habits, you know, your rest and hygiene and self-care, countering your limiting beliefs, establishing new routines and healthy boundaries, really creating, you know, getting ahead of stress, and redesigning your reward system, because our reward system really starts coming into like challenge when we come across interference. You know, whether it be like overeating or drinking too much or watching too much TV and tuning out. This practice of tuning in and to really start getting more conscious of what we could do going forward is the invitation. So this Unbreakable journey is a free training. This is a group training that I offer on an ongoing basis. And for this training, it's a $1,200 value. And just for the registrants of Unbreakable, because I've read all your surveys, I feel like this is something that you would really love to participate in. I'm limiting it to just a few spots, a handful of spots. And one way to just start is to register right now. It's open, that link, tinyurl.com/August Unbreakable training. This is only offered to you guys. And we have 3 training dates, August 10th, 17th, and 24th. And I would encourage you to book a one-on-one with me so that I can get a whole health history evaluation on what your goals are, and also tap into my friends, panelists like this, to actually be able to support you further. So we can't really start making unbreakable life performance changes until we practice, until we put things into motion. So I just wanted to share that with you. This is going to go out in an email to everybody who's registered across all 4 panels. And so I wanted to just share that with you. The other thing I wanted to share is I'm so grateful for those of you who have donated to Kula for Karma. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kula for Karma is an organization that I am supporting. We had a panelist on episode 2 who basically is the program developer for that. And Kula for Karma goes out into communities, underserved communities, to actually bring yoga and meditation and mindfulness to improve mental health in underserved areas, like inner cities, prisons, domestic violence homes. And so this is such an amazing cause, because mental health today is it's so fragile right now, and we really need to support organizations like this that actually bring yoga and mindfulness to the public, especially to the public areas where they don't have access to yoga studios. So, you can register, you can go back to the Eventbrite registration, bit.ly/Unbreakable Summit, and there is a donation opportunity there. So you could donate $5, $2, whatever you feel you can do, but I would love to continue to support Kula for Karma. So I just wanted to mention that. I'm so grateful. If there are any last questions, we have a couple of, Patricia said, love the reminder of intentional self-care combined with habit stacking. Yes, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, just thinking about positive affirmations, and what we say in our mind, in our dialogue, actually comes out in our energy and our physiology. And I know this to be true because I've worked with clients who have been stuck in that mindset of grief and loss and, not being able to move life forward, where they show up on my Zoom, my clients show up on my Zoom screen and they're just grim. They're like really pissed off at the world. And, when they start changing their energy and the inner dialogue that's in their mind, believe it or not, your choices start to change. So I invite you to the journey of getting into practice. It's a free training that is valued at $1,200. I'm not selling you on this. I'm only going to accept a handful of participants, but I would love, if you really think you need this, please join me, and you'll get the link and all the details in the email and the follow-up. So check your spams. I know some of you didn't get spam, like the links. I got a bunch of emails saying, I don't know where the link is. There's a link that goes out with Eventbrite, but there's also emails that I don't want to over bombard you with, but there's an email. So anything that comes from Tina at Goodness Multiplied will give you gifts, and we'll give you gifts from these panelists, these amazing panelists. Thank you so much tonight. Junie, Robert, Jen, you guys are just truly, truly incredible beings. They are transforming people's lives on a daily basis. This is what they do. They don't go work for corporations. This is what they do. They go and help people like you and me, like where everybody needs support. And without support, we're only as good as our mindset. And if our mindset's not right, then where do we go from there? So receive the support. And all of these panelists will be giving you gifts and an email to join them, continue the journey with them as well. So, and they're amazing, amazing offers. So I just want to thank you again for joining us tonight. I want to end on time to be respectful of our busy panelists, and join us for our last episode next week, Rising Out of Scarcity. Again, we're going to touch about feeling broken, but being, surpassing that, really rising out of scarcity and seeing prosperity in the world around us, in our health, in our wealth, in our relationships. So don't miss next episode and join us back again. And I'm just so grateful again. Thank you, Junie, for your time. Midlife Love Coach, Dr. Kandarjian, Energy Healing Practitioner, and Jen Cormier, grief guide and somatic healer. So grateful. We have so much to learn from my friends. So thank you again, everybody. And if there's any follow-up questions, you can email me. Do you guys want to?
I'm gonna hop in here just real quickly, because I know you're closing up, but I just want to honor the heck out of you, Tina. Like all the energy, all the effort, your vision to create this, how you've been pulling in amazing panelists, the topics, how you host this offering that you just gave to everybody is just delicious. And your passion to helping people with this platform, I just really want to everybody just send love to this woman who's doing such great work in the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love
Thank you
guys.
for all your efforts.
I love you guys. And the passion
Take
here.
care, Junie. Nice to meet you, Reverend Jen.
The passion here across the board is we got to take back our health and our well-being. It's our choice. Nobody can do it for us. Nobody's going to do it for you. It's got to be on you. And getting the support and the guidance and the love around us is actually going to change our lives for the next 20 years. So right now is the time. This is the time of transition. Yes. So God bless you guys. I'll see you guys next week. That's all for now. Have a wonderful week and a blessed week, guys.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Good night. Good night.